But certainly this is an exciting time, and before we start, if I could just check in terms of families, who here has a first-time student that will be going to college? Wow, okay. Great. Who here has at least one student that's already in college? Okay, great. How about 2 students? Anybody with 3? You're welcome to come up and share the podium with me. So as much as this process might seem like a daunting process, I think we're starting at a perfect time where we're starting semester 2, students are actually getting ready to start the search process. Some already have, but certainly it doesn't matter where you are in the process. This is where we start with all students. So one of the biggest things about tonight, the biggest takeaway is hopefully that you'll think about things that you wish that you had known. So we have a student panel here as well, and I hope you all received the email and was able to read up on the candidates that we have our Red Brick University admissions reps here that will kind of take you through what happens in an admissions committee in terms of how they look at applications and choose students. So, to get started, I just want to first introduce you to our school counselors here so that you have put a face to a name. That way when you make appointments to meet with your counselors, students and parents, you'll know who. Mr. Diamantopoulos, he's on his way. He's at basketball practice, but they're ending pretty soon. Miss Ariel, who is out sick. We have Mr. Flynn here. Give you a little wave. Miss Floyd. Mrs. Lucier is also out sick. Yes, we do get sick in our office. It seems to be running through. We have Mrs. O'Connor. We have Mrs. Rice. Miss Vega. In our office, we also have 2 very important people, our office support, our registrar, and our secretary, Mrs. King and Mrs. Murphy. They process almost 3,000 applications in our office, amongst a lot of other duties as well. Our academic support specialist in our office is Mr. Earls, who's not here tonight. And then this year we have 2 graduate interns. We have Mr. Bradley and Mr. Russell. They are in the graduate program in Assumption, becoming school counselors, so they will be working with a lot of students as well. Just to start off, before we actually start our panel, I just want to talk a little bit about what's new. Things that we've been working on in our office. One of the things that we've been working on is our values. We really, a lot of the programming that we produce, we really think about what do we value in our students and what we want our students to have before they graduate. So with our values, I'll kind of weave in and out of the presentation, and you can see what they are. One is inclusivity. We want to make sure that we're inclusive with all students with all of our programming. One of them is connection, making sure for students that you are well connected with your teachers, with your peers, but most importantly in this process with your counselors. We can't stress more than enough if you make appointments, the more you make appointments with your counselors and going over what we need to do for the process, the better off you'll be. The personal responsibility. Balance is key. I think you'll hear tonight from some of our students, but keeping a balance with everything to make sure that you are in a good spot throughout this process so you don't get too stressed out, and respectfulness. Making sure that this whole process is well respected and that everyone remains calm and just is able to make sure that we handle things appropriately. One of the things that's new that we're piloting a program, it's called SCORE. It's kind of like the equivalent to Naviance, but it's almost kind of like a turbo Naviance. for. I have a website in here. You don't need to take pictures of the slides. I will have it posted tomorrow on our website for you. There is a link on here as well that you can click on. And it basically helps you through the college search. Parents, you will have an invitation probably in a month or two once we get the students settled in the program to try it out. There's a great financial aid process that you can go through on there as you're looking at colleges, and even suggest colleges to your students as well. So that's a possibility. So where are you at? Right now, I know that there are juniors out there that have already visited colleges. I know some juniors have started doing the college search. I know some students haven't started at all. And no matter where you're at, it's okay. So if you look at this picture in the corner down here, I really tried to look for a pair of glasses that were blinders. One of the things that I have to say for students, this is your process. No matter who you're sitting next to, you need to pay attention and put your blinders on. So when I Googled what glass blinders look like, that's what that came up. So anything that you can take away from tonight, one of the most important things, and I tell seniors this constantly, is put your blinders on. This is where students stress themselves out because there's a lot of talk of where you're applying, what you're doing, what you're looking at, and it causes undue stress. So this is an individual process, so make sure that you take that into consideration. So at this time, what I'd like to do is I'm going to invite Mr. Flynn up. He's going to moderate the student panel.
Thank you. So what we're going to do is, as you guys can see, we have 4 of our current seniors here. We're going to provide some insight into their college search, their application process. It's one thing for you students to hear it from your counselor, your teachers, your parents, guardians about this whole entire process. I think it's extremely beneficial to hear it from your peers as well, especially those who have gone through it so recently. So what they're going to do is tell their story, share some insights, maybe some things that they enjoyed throughout the process, maybe some things that they found challenging, and if they could do it over, maybe some things they could share with you. So one by one, they'll kind of explain their process and their journey, and then at the end, if we have time, we'll take a couple questions if students and parents may have them. So if we could first introduce ourselves, maybe talk about the schools that we've applied to, maybe schools that we got into, and if we ultimately have kind of made a decision on which schools we'd like to attend.
Hi, my name is Nahal Chaudhary. As you know, I'm a current senior here, and I applied to roughly 15 colleges, and so far I've been accepted to UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, Rutgers, Worcester State, Simmons University, and MCPHS. I am majoring in neuroscience on a pre-med track, and I haven't made a decision just yet about where I'm going to attend, as I'm still waiting to hear back from a couple of schools. But after all those have come back with all their offers and financial packages, then I'll be making a decision. So.
Hi, I'm Sarah Berry. I'm also a senior. So I applied to 5 schools. I applied to Birmingham State, University of Maine, University of Rhode Island, Quinnipiac, and Bridgewater State. I decided to go to Bridgewater State University, and I'm planning on doing secondary education with a concentration in English. Hi, my name is Viviana Polly, and I applied to 11 schools. Some of the schools that I've been accepted to are UMass Amherst, UMass Lowell, and Emerson. I'm not sure where I want to go yet, but once I hear back from all my schools, then I'll decide. And I'm majoring in marketing.
Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Pitney. I'm also a senior here. I've applied to 10 colleges, and so far I've gotten into Assumption, Clark, the College of Worcester, which is in Ohio, not like 30 minutes away, and the Catholic University of America. And I'm interested in majoring in political science.
Awesome. So if you guys could explain your experience from this time last year until now, kind of the steps that you took to ultimately apply to the schools that you wanted to apply to, and then for some of you who made a decision where you want to go, if you've applied early action, early decision, and maybe kind of the time frame of that versus like a regular decision.
Yeah, so during this time, I went on a lot of college tours. I think I looked at like 20 schools. At first I thought I wanted a small liberal arts school, and as I started to go on a bunch of tours, I realized it's not exactly what I wanted. I definitely would recommend going on Naviance. I found that extremely helpful, especially when I felt like, oh my god, I don't like any of these schools yet, what am I going to do? And I actually found BSU based off the other schools that Naviance recommended. Hey, if you like this school, you should check this one out. Definitely, I applied early action to all my schools, and if you have that option, I would definitely recommend applying to a few schools early action.
I personally applied all of my schools to early action because I just wanted to get it over with. So I was pressing submit button on Halloween night, but that's just, my choice. I just didn't want to deal with it when everyone else was dealing with it. So I could be stress-free during second semester senior year, but that's just like a personal choice to you. And yeah, I definitely do recommend early action if your school does provide it.
I would agree with Divya and Sarah in the sense that if you can apply early action, in my opinion, it's more beneficial just because you hear back sooner. So instead of hearing your decision on April 1st and then having to submit a deposit for that particular school on May 1st and making that final decision in only a month, you hear back right around Christmas. So you have about 4 months to make that decision. But if you're, and I'm sure Ms. Wynn will discuss this later tonight, but there are certain schools, especially there are certain schools that have a policy where if you apply early action and are deferred, then your name is not put back into the pool for a regular decision. So so my recommendation would be apply early action to all of your target schools. And then for your reach schools, apply regular decision. And if you get in, then make the decision after hearing back. So that's just what I would say, at least from my experience.
Great, thanks. And as you guys know, you guys have probably experienced a bunch of different emotions throughout this whole entire process. Positives, negatives, and stress. If you could shed some light on some positive experience through this whole entire process for the last year.
Yeah, so I'd say the best part of the whole process is really this part right here. It's certainly not when you're actually applying. It's really, I'd say narrowing down. I mean, I don't even know how many, call it like 35 at first, like on the spreadsheet, and not everybody does that, but really just being able to narrow down, okay, what colleges do I want to see, what colleges what colleges am I actually going to think about going to, and then really narrowing that down. I think you learn a lot about yourself as you go and see these colleges, about your learning style, about your personality, because each school has their own type of personality. And so yeah, my favorite part was certainly doing the tours and visiting the schools.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Tom. There are a lot of positive aspects during this process, and I think that you'll find that during this process there's a lot of support, especially from the school, meeting one-on-one with your guidance counselors, meeting with your teachers for letters of recommendation. All of that makes you very excited and feel very comfortable throughout this whole process. And definitely visiting all those colleges, you get to kind of, again, like find out a little bit about yourself and what you want to do. And it's a very exciting process, especially at the end, where you kind of get to decide where you're going to spend like the next 4 years of your life. And so that's really exciting.
Right. What about the negative or challenging things about this whole entire process?
Okay, so I'm really good at complaining, so I'm going to be good at this. But obviously, like the number one negative aspect of this is the stress. And the
mental breakdowns that you'll have at 2 a.m., but that's okay because as long as you surround yourself with good people, they'll help you through it and they'll make sure that, you're all right and make sure that you're all right first. Put yourself before all the school stuff. Your health is the most important thing. And, don't put all the work for one night. Make sure you spread it out because procrastination is not going to be your friend here. I learned that by experience. I procrastinate a lot. But, and also a really, really big thing I had was that I thought that people would judge me based on, what schools I applied to. Don't let that get to you. Go on your own path. Don't think about anyone else. Don't apply here because your friends are applying here. Or don't be I'm applying to this school because I feel like I'm not good enough for this other school. So, don't let that get to you. Go apply to wherever you feel is the best for you. That's the most important part.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely one of the negative aspects is just kind of how consuming college can be. I would find that, I would come to school, my friends would be talking about it, then I would go home, my parents would be talking about it, and it just felt like we couldn't even go 10 minutes without talking about college, which is fine, it's really good to be on top of it, but just don't let it consume you. Everyone is going to go to college if you want. You're going to go to the place that's best for you, not what's best for your parents, not what's best for your friends, what's best for you.
Okay. Hindsight now, right? Imagine yourselves in this position last year. Anything that maybe you would have done differently?
So something that I would have done differently, even though it didn't seem like it, but starting as early as possible is definitely key. You find that when you give yourself the most time, you kind of space yourself out and you don't leave anything for the night before and you have everything sort of planned out. And I would also visit as many colleges as possible, and you can space this out definitely over the spring, over the summer. If you just go on a college's website, they'll give you so much information about all the dates that they have, and actually visiting the college gives you a really, really good idea on whether you like the atmosphere, whether you like the curriculum, whether you like just the school itself, and it gives you a really good background. And if I were to do it again, I would definitely kind of make a lot of rough lists at first about colleges that I was thinking about applying to and utilizing the tools such as Naviance because they can be super, super helpful in kind of giving you ideas in colleges that you wouldn't have thought of before. And the earlier that you start and get that list together, the better off you'll be in the end when you kind of are narrowing it down, because it does get expensive ultimately in the end, even just applying to all these colleges. So it's definitely best to kind of go start early. I would definitely even start earlier. And definitely also make sure that you find a college that's a good, like everybody was saying, a good fit for you. And because you might find that maybe it's a small liberal arts college, maybe it's a bigger public university, maybe it's a research university. So definitely just look into what works best for you.
So I'd say one of the things that I would have done differently is certainly start my supplemental essays sooner because they're really, that's one of the hardest parts to me is writing about yourself and writing about just your personality, what you like. To me, it's very difficult to actually express in words and really dig deep and really try to understand yourself better. So the sooner that you can start writing your college essay, and as soon as they release the applications, trying to start the supplemental essays as quickly as possible. I'm just trying to outline what I want to say, how do I want to say it, and then just going after it. Because the last thing you want to do is have even a week left and then have not even looked at the prompt for a certain supplemental essay. Another thing I'd say too is really, and this is one thing I somewhat regretted, is that I didn't want to, there were certain times where I'd contain myself just to this area. So, for example, one time I was this is in my junior year, I was going out to see Case Western Reserve University, which is in Cleveland. I was just going to visit it. It was a school that I was interested in. And when I talked to Ms. Floyd about it, she recommended that I visit the College of Worcester. and I'd certainly never heard of it. I'm sure 75% of you have probably never heard of it either. I mean, their nickname is the Fighting Scots, so, you know, it's a pretty, it's not well known around here, but when I visited it, it was one of my favorite schools, and I just think that there's so many great schools that are not just in New England, but in the Midwest and the South and even on the West Coast. So if distance isn't, if you find that distance isn't one of the things, or that you don't mind being farther away, then I would certainly expand your horizons.
One thing I wish I did was I wish I talked to more people around me that went through this process, because I'm an only child, so this is the first and only time my family and I have to go through this process. But I wish I reached out to more like kids, I don't know, like sophomores or freshmen in college, and asked them how it was like for them, and maybe like take some advice from them. So I think that's like very important for you to do in order to get kind of like an idea of how this journey is going to be.
Okay. Any final advice, words of encouragement?
Even though it seems like a really long road ahead, you all got this, and Shrewsbury High is awesome with helping you prepare for college, both like academically and finding a school. I have Mr. Flynn, and I feel like he's very supportive. So don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it, and I wish you guys like the best of luck.
One more thing I'd say is just my last final piece of advice is what some people were alluding to earlier, is that this process is really an individual process. It's not, I certainly wouldn't recommend picking colleges based on what other people have picked. It's really, and you kind of figure this out as you're going along, what type of college you're looking for, what you think would be the best fit for you. And my big piece of advice would really be to, if you're a student, try and block out, use advice, but it's really your decision. And from what I've found, a lot of it's just a gut feeling, like you walk onto campus, you see things, and you just show up and you're like, wow, like I could be here. So I think it really is your decision, and don't let other students or even other adults try to make that decision for you.
Just make sure that you surround yourself with very good and supportive people, because you're going to feel bad sometimes, and that's okay, that's normal, but they'll be there to help you through it. And don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like, you're gonna get into college, don't worry about it. Like, not everyone's gonna hate you, not everyone's gonna, love you. And that's just the fact that you have to accept. And, I got rejected from some of my colleges. I got rejected from my top choice, but I got into a lot of great colleges, and that's the most important thing.
And just always know that all of the seniors currently are always here to help you. Feel free to reach out to us, especially all of us, anytime you ever need any advice. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to help you. We were literally in your shoes a year ago, and so we know exactly how you're feeling. So any questions, just feel free to ask us. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Great work.
Thanks, guys. We're going to dismiss our seniors so they can go get their homework done. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll see.
So I'm just going to very briefly go over what our procedures here at Shrewsbury High School. And when I say brief, it's brief because I think the second part of the program would be really important for you to kind of have a glimpse of what it looks like to be on admissions end. We will have another meeting as a senior, an evening program called Nuts and Bolts Nights, where we'll go over a lot of the details. So I'm not going to hit you with a whole ton of information, detailed information at this time to overwhelm you, but we'll go over that again as a senior year. Options. One of the things that I think is really important to talk with you about options, there are going to be students who are looking at 4-year schools, 2-year schools. Some students actually go out to trade schools. Some students will be looking at the military, possibly the military academies. There's also ROTC scholarships that are out there that I know some of our seniors are pursuing right now. And some students choose to go out to work right after high school. Some students will take a year off and they'll do a gap year. There are a lot of different gap year programs as well. But certainly, when I say each path is individual, that's where you work with your counselor on. So make sure that you do what's right for you and making sure that that timing is right for you as well. In terms of resources, over the past couple days, and we'll be finishing up tomorrow, counselors have been in English classes going over the college career portfolio, really talking about the whole college process, the search process, and also looking at the college essay. We're getting students to start to think about the college essay and how they can start that process. We also have a newsletter, which I believe you receive from me, a monthly newsletter. Our website, there's information on that. Our current program that we have that students have been using is called Naviance, but we are piloting a new program called SCORE. The other thing is the college fair. In the spring, it's a great place for students to do a lot of window shopping, to ask a lot of questions about from a lot of different colleges. Application Boot Camp. If you haven't heard of Application Boot Camp, we do run a summer program where it's a week-long half days. We run 4 sessions for students to come in. They have to have an essay already written. We have admissions representatives who come, and also an English teacher. They'll both do an essay. They'll read your essay and give you feedback. But we also do a mock interview as well. And there's also a little financial aid component towards the end. So it's a great opportunity to really get started. Most students start their applications at that time. It is by lottery this year. Last year we started by lottery, and I'll send you further information on the newsletter, because we start that registration process on April 1st. Okay? All right, so here at SHS, this is just kind of a snapshot of what this looks like. So we have our college search, which is what we're kicking off now in the spring of junior year. We do our 2-day curriculum in English classes now, and then we also do a individual meeting with all juniors in April. With that said, juniors, we have given you a list of things you've got to accomplish, a little checklist of things to do before you come and meet with us. So make sure you do that. With the college application season is in the fall of the senior year. We start off with Nuts and Bolts Night in early September. There'll be a financial aid for students and parents, and then in the spring of senior year we have something called After the Acceptance, where we look at the financial aid, and you can actually bring some of your financial aid letters and learn how to compare them as well. Okay? So at this time, I'd like to invite, one more thing to go over. We get a lot of feedback from students and parents how complicated this whole procedure is with the college process. So one thing that I just want to talk about, I'm going to narrow it down for you really quick. There are 3 areas, and students, you are involved in every single area. For students, this is what you're responsible for, and we will take you through this process. We started talking about this yesterday and today. Teacher recommendations, sending your SAT scores to colleges, completing and submitting the application, making appointments with your counselor, and completing your bio survey, and paying that application fee. So that's what you're mostly responsible for with the application process. Students and counselors, this is when you meet with your counselor. You You are required to meet with your counselor to go over that bio survey in order to have a letter of recommendation. My full recommendation is it's not one meeting, it's several meetings to really narrow down your college search, figure out who you want to ask what teachers for letters of recommendations, and also with your letter of recommendation. So that is required. You also meet with your counselors in the fall to do the transcript request form with your counselors. We do not send out any transcripts without a meeting with the counselor. Okay, and parents, of course, you are involved as well. So for students and parents, there is a parent brag sheet that will be on the website for you to complete about your students. Sometimes, as counselors, we like to have like the big picture. So we get feedback from teachers, possibly coaches, and from you as well. Sometimes students forget, they leave things out, they don't give us all of the information. Parents are invited to, of course, the most important part, the financial piece, the FAFSA, which is the application for financial aid, which will happen in the fall, and also the CSS profile, which is a secondary financial aid process that we'll talk about in the fall as well. Okay? So in terms of this process, students, while you're involved, you're not alone. You really are working in collaboration with your counselors and parents as well. All right, so at this point, I'm going to change it over to Red Brick University, where we have our 3 admissions reps. Come on up, take a seat. We have Terry, John, and Allison. They are going to be our admissions committee, and I believe I sent out the candidate pack that we have. Hopefully you've had a chance to read them. We'll go over them very briefly, just the stats on them, not the essays or anything like the recommendations. So hopefully you have that.
Okay, so before we talk about the individual candidates, it's important to understand what Red Brick University is all about. And that's important because you and your application won't change much. Each school is school, but the schools will have different priorities, things that they're looking for. You aren't a different person, but the schools are different and looking for different needs. So it's why you will get admitted to some of your schools, hopefully a lot of your schools, but that same application might not get the same decision at other schools. So just there's a profile on the screen of Red Brick University. Some of the key things that we probably want to keep in mind as we make decisions on the 3 candidates we're going to look for today is that it is described as a world premier research university. It highlights some specific schools, a business school, a school of medicine, and an engineering school. So those are probably academic areas that are priorities to the school, although they do have 200 different academic programs. You can see that it's a relatively old school. It's a private 4-year liberal arts school. Students come from all over the world to attend Red Brick University. From an athletic perspective, it's got a couple of Division I teams in lacrosse and track, and their other sports are Division III. I did the math because it has their stats for last year's class. Red Brick University last year had a 36% admit rate, and then what's called the yield rate is how many students actually enroll out of that admitted group. So they had about a 27% yield rate. And then you can see their academic stats. They're looking for pretty strong students, both in terms of GPA and test scores. Require traditional things, the Common App, transcripts, test scores, recommendations. And then it also gives you a little bit of information about financial aid. And that they do award financial aid to a fairly large percentage of their class. So those are things that you'll just want to keep in your back of your mind as we present the cases. This committee is going to work a little differently than I think most of our schools would. Usually, as the admissions counselor, I'd present one student, and we would make a decision on that one student, and then move on to the next one. But we're going to present all 3 of them, and then vote. And we're going to try to stick to that we admit about 36% of our applicants. So we're going to try to pick which one of these students, as the committee, this is on you, you're going to make a decision about who we're going to admit. And we'll each just present one student, going over some of the nuts and bolts and the high-level stuff. Hopefully some of you have already had a chance to read this, but then you can ask questions about the candidates if you want, and then we'll just decide who we're going to admit. So,
Dory first, all right. So I think some of the things that really stick out about Dory is that she's sort of right in amongst all of our averages. So like her midpoint for the ACT is right there at 31, so it's right within, sort of our average admits, but then also her weighted GPA as well is right there. I think some of the things that sort of stick out about her are really that she is seemingly really invested in this idea of going into journalism and communications. It's something that she's blogging about. She's on the school newspaper, the yearbook, and then she's a communications chair for this youth service league. The other thing too is that we sort of I see here that she's very much sort of on the rise. Like for the freshman year, started off a certain way, but then over the past 2 years, she's really done quite exceptionally well, challenged herself with some honors and AP courses. So that shows me that she's sort of quite serious and that she's sort of on the upswing as she's entering college. I think her essay is also quite interesting, the way that she sort of formatted it, with talking about all these different masks and sort of describing herself and the way that she sort of exhibits some self-awareness and sort of where she's at. You'll probably notice in here, although this is something that we do not take into account when we're discussing students' admissibility, is whether or not they have a learning disability. We are not legally allowed to take that into consideration. But it's clear that at the point when she finally, when she was diagnosed with this, that her grades get better. And so that's part of that self-awareness. That's part of what we see overall in her academic path. So although she discloses this, it's not something that we're going to take into consideration either way. I think she just has some great letters of recommendation. Certainly having one from an alum helps. And so, that really sort of demonstrates that she's got, some good folks in her corner and she's making a really informed decision. So when we hear about students who, apply to like 20 schools, we want to make sure that a student is invested in coming to our school, is well informed and making the most educated choice possible. So that's where her points, I think that's something that stands out about her, is her points of contact with the school. That she came to the college fair, she came to the high school visit, she's reached out to our office, and so those things kind of show a level of investment. And so with an admit rate in the mid-30s, we want to be admitting students that we feel reasonably sure are going to also choose our school and attend. So when we hear about students applying for dozens of schools, we want students who are making a really informed, educated decision, but that are also genuinely interested in the schools they're applying to. So I would feel pretty good about admitting her, but obviously we'll vote a little later.
okay, so Henry is a young man from California. His academic record, his GPA does fall within the range of what Red Brick University is looking for. When you're looking at his transcript, you can see that he had some C's early on, but he definitely got better as time went along. His junior and senior year are both all A's and B's, and also a really rigorous curriculum. He had honors courses starting in 9th grade, and then really stepped up and took AP classes in 11th and 12th grade. His transcript shows that there's I think a strong strength and interest in science and math. Those are where he takes his AP courses, and where his grades are. The lower grades tend to be in the humanities courses. That strength is also shown when you look at his test scores. His total test scores are within the mid 50% range, but he has an 800 on his math score, and then he did both math level 1 and level 2 subject tests, got 800 on both of those, and then took both AP Calculus AB and AP Calculus BC and got 5s on both of those exams. And then he's also taking, in addition to the AP classes, he's doing 3 high-level math classes at the University of California, Irvine. So there's a really clear academic preference and interest as well as strength there. And they match with what he's interested in studying. He's interested in doing computer engineering, focused on artificial intelligence, computer programming, and that interest continues to play itself out when you look at what he's chosen to get involved with. He wasn't really involved in any activities in 9th and 10th grade, but in junior year he got really involved in robotics, computer clubs, serving in leadership positions in both of those, as well as doing an internship with a tech company. That interest continues to play itself out in his essay, where he describes using his skills in computer to design an app for the phone to help his grandmother with Alzheimer's. So he really wants to use his computer skills to do good and to help others. So that is something he's interested in as he pursues engineering and computer science in college. He's also had a fair amount of contact. He's visited our campus. He did a college fair in the local Anaheim area. He interviewed with one of our associate deans of admissions, who really gave him a really strong write-up. I'd say the one thing that came up that might be a cause for concern and something the committee will want to consider is that there was an incident of plagiarism. So in 9th grade, he, in a political science class, didn't fully cite within one of his papers. He takes ownership for that mistake. The teachers and counselors both support that this was an honest mistake, that he learned from it, he grew from it, and has really become a better writer as he's been more conscious about how he does his research and uses the information he finds in his papers. So I think overall, Henry is a kid that really has a clear strength and passion, and it's something that fits well with Red Brick's strengths. So I could definitely see him as somebody that we might want to consider as an admit.
Okay, so on to Marcella. If everyone had a chance to look at her, in a quick overview, in reading her application, the first thing I noticed was that it was consistent. There was consistency throughout the entire application. I look at her application and I can see that she is a female from California. I see that she is definitely challenging herself senior year with a lot of AP courses. Most students tend to feel that maybe senior year is the best time of year to maybe take some electives and slack off a little bit, and we do pay attention to that. So I can see that she's still trying to challenge herself to show us that she is invested in her academic future. So I'm seeing that she made the honor roll, that she was a student athlete as well, so she's very well-rounded. She does have a strong interest in public health policy, and that is something that I noticed she does carry throughout the entire application. So she definitely has a clear focus on what she's looking to study. I can see that her test scores, she took her SATs 3 separate occasions, and in super scoring she is going to be falling very close to the range that is acceptable, along with her ACT scores. She has been involved in community service, she has a job, she's playing sports, so again, very well-rounded, which is something that college admissions reps are definitely looking for. We want to make sure that the student is going to be an asset to the community as a whole. Taking a look at her transcript, you can see that she's done fairly well. She had a dip in her sophomore year, and that's something that I make note of and will definitely look into. If the student doesn't alert that reason to me in the application, I may look for it in a letter of recommendation from the guidance counselor, or I may even reach out to the guidance counselor and ask if there was a reason. But further into her application, her essay, she did a really great job of revealing some personal information that gave me more insight into who she is and let me know what was impacting her sophomore year, which ended up being the death of a family member. So those are things that we're taking into consideration, and you can see that she's clearly on an upward swing, which is what we're looking for when we're looking at the transcripts. We want to look at the trends. Is it an upward? Is it a downward trend? Did they bounce back? Was there a reason for the dip in their transcript? So she's very clear on getting that message across, and again, being very consistent with her essay and letting us know that this had a major impact on her, and this is why she's looking to major in public policy, health policy. She has alumni in the family. She has visited the college. She has gone to their preview program. She came to the high school visit. She has clear displayed interest, which some universities definitely do track. She is definitely a diverse individual where if you look at some of her questions and answers, she really doesn't fall into any one category. She seems extremely open-minded to different schools of thought, which is definitely an asset to a college community. You're going to be introduced to people from all over the world and all different beliefs, so being open-minded to others' opinions and thoughts says a lot about you as a person. Her letters of recommendation are stellar. They're exactly what I'm looking for, where she is falling kind of on that cusp of what Red Brick University would accept. She really would be, again, borderline academically and right on the edge with her test scores, but her letters of recommendation really paint a really strong picture of who she is academically, letting you know what she's like as an individual, that her homework is legendary, that she learns from the process, she takes criticism and applies it. All of that is what I'm looking for to make sure that she's going to be able to excel academically at the college. Not seeing any red flags here. I see that she's even been in touch with one of the coaches already. She may not be an actual recruit, but is definitely good enough to be a walk-on. So we're actually getting a letter of recommendation from someone who's already at Red Brick University who sees her potential and all of the impact she can have at the college. So from reviewing this, she is someone that I would definitely consider as an admit.
Okay, so the admissions council who presented them, I think, would vote for their specific student, but we can't vote for all of them. So we're going to now throw it to you for discussion about these three candidates. If you have questions or comments that you want to explore a little bit with us, and then we'll actually do the official vote. But what are people's thoughts and comments about any of these three candidates? It was kind of both a question and a comment, specifically about Henry and the fact that he leans really high and heavy into the science and math world. But Red Brick is a liberal arts university, and so would we want somebody that is very singularly focused, or would we want somebody with a little bit more background? The liberal arts institution, as a definition, is going to require students to take classes across the disciplines. Somebody like Henry could not come to Red Brick and only take science and math classes. Every student would be expected to be taking humanities and sciences and social sciences and language, so that is something we might want to consider when making a decision about a student, is do they fit into that overall liberal arts background. What I would counter a little bit with it is that one of the renowned programs we have as a liberal arts institution is our School of Engineering, so we do have a focus in that as well. So you can go to a liberal arts school and still be interested in the sciences. But that is a good question when you do have somebody that does have a real focused interest. You know, we talked about Marcella as being really well-rounded and diverse in her interests. So is there a difference of their preference between those two very different kinds of academic approaches? So it's something that we can certainly explore as a committee.
So it's more so a technicality that if a student discloses a learning disability or a learning challenge or difference during the admissions process, we're not legally allowed to take that into account when making the admissions decision itself. We would sort of put that to the side and sort of consider all of the other factors that go into a student coming into the school and into the admissions decision itself. And then we would likely assist the student through finding whatever appropriate accommodations are available for the student and meeting whatever requirements are outlined in that student's waste testing and IEPs and whatever else they provide to us to sort of do that. We certainly recognize that both a death in the family or an illness or any of those challenges are going to be taken into account, and so we take those as challenges, but not the diagnosis itself.
I think that the primary point is that as an institution, we can't say, Marcella has this documented learning differences, she's going to need a lot of resources to be successful, therefore we're not going to admit her. We have to say, what are the grades on the paper, and we can use the context to say, okay, she got better junior year, but I think that that's the key is we can't look and say, oh, because of a learning difference, they're going to be in a resource center, they're going to be in the writing center, and that's just too much. We don't want to do that, so we're going to deny them because of that. I think that that's really the very legal thing we cannot do. If the student meets our admissibility criteria, we admit them, and then we help them access the resources they need to continue to be successful.
So I just want to clarify I understand correctly. So you're basically just saying you can't discriminate.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so you're not saying you don't take into consideration the struggle they went through no matter what it is.
Correct.
Okay. But it sounded otherwise. I got confused by that.
Great question. Other thoughts and comments on these students?
Well, I'm still, following up on that question, previous question. I still am not clear because you said it's a technicality versus are you taking into account the struggles that a person with, learning disability would have to go through? Because you said it's a technicality, but struggles do exist in terms of how they have to deal with it.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of different struggles that exist. There's the death in the family, there's the learning difference, there's physical health, there's issues within the family, there's family dynamic struggles that students have to, there's a lot of personal struggles that they have to overcome, and they allow, we can consider the context of what's going on within the student's background, and knowing what they've overcome to be successful is something we can consider. But it really becomes we can't use any of those things, particularly something protected like health and mental health and learning differences. We cannot use those in a way that's discriminatory. But we also can't say, oh, we're going to forgive the Ds because they have a learning difference, and we're just going to admit them because that's why they have the D. So it's context, it's something that we consider, but there are definitely protected classes that we cannot discriminate against. So we have to, we can't say we're making a decision because of this. It's just something that adds to help us understand the path that the student has been on to get to where they are.
Just to tap on top of that a little bit, I think that the difference here is with Marcella, the only reason that I was pinpointing that was because she had very good grades, and it was just that 1 year where I saw the dip. So it was, somewhat surprising. So that's where I'm going to dig a little deeper and find out if there was something that was happening that year. Was she just struggling academically? Did she get the academic assistance that she needed? Was there a reason? There could be any reason that someone, struggles a little bit during one of the years. If it was consistently, I saw D's freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, the likelihood of that student being admitted to the college, again, it's about the context. So we take into account all the struggles that everybody has. I mean, we have students that struggle through homelessness. We have students that, both parents are deceased. I mean, there are a lot of struggles that we take into consideration. But again, when we're looking at them academically, we're looking at their grades across the board. So if your child has a learning disability, and they're still performing well, we're not looking at them negatively in any way, shape, or form with that disability. We still have to make sure at the end of the day that the student can succeed academically at the institution. We're not going to set any student up for failure, certainly. So we take every aspect into consideration. A lot of students and families will often ask me, how much of the application do you read? We read every word, because it might be that one thing that you forgot to put in there that your guidance counselor puts in that gives me a little bit more insight into who you are, or your coach that submitted that letter of recommendation that says something that you forgot. We really do read every word of it, and we take every little bit into consideration. There's no discrimination in that way. It's just the context in which we're looking at it. The student still has to be academically admissible to the college and still has to perform academically successful at college. Does that help? Yes. Yes.
So I've heard of liberal arts colleges, I've heard of pre-professional, I've heard of research universities. So I'm just wondering what types of these correspond with maybe like someone whose academic record is great at everything, or for the example of maybe like the second person you went over, someone who's very dedicated to like math, maybe not so good at other things, versus maybe someone who's great at everything. Like what I'm asking is what types of colleges correspond to those types of, let's say, mindsets, academic mindsets.
That's a really good question. I think as some of the students said earlier, it really depends on the student. You know, there might be a student who's exceptional at math who ends up being a violin virtuoso, and then they want to pursue a path in music, so they apply to a music school, but on paper it might look like, oh, you should be an engineer. And so what we do, I think we're sort of getting away from these candidates, but I think what we do as counselors and what your guidance counselors, like our responsibility is to help guide students in making that process a little bit more informed, and that's up to the student too, to be as informed about each campus as possible, because an engineering program at a school with 1,500 students might be a better fit for one student than an engineering program at a school with 50,000 students. And so that's really where the characteristics of the student's learning style and their background and their experience is going to be impacted by where the schools that they're choosing. I will say that the most alarming thing when I work with students outside of my role, as like as a consultant or mentor or whatever, when I see a student that has like Penn State listed and then also Merrimack, it's sort of like, well, what are you looking for? You know, like these are two exceptionally different institutions, and is there something about each campus that you like? Or are there commonalities between those two schools? Is it a programmatic decision that this school offers an excellent program and so does this one, and I don't care about the school size, I don't care about the campus culture, because I just want to study this program, and these two schools just happen to have it. So that's really like where, I don't know that liberal arts schools are going to appeal to certain kinds of students and with certain strengths and certain backgrounds, and they're going to offer different kinds of majors. Whereas, a Research One institution with a really strong program in robotics is going to appeal to other kinds of students, and super selective schools are going to appeal to certain kinds of students. So it's really, that's sort of tough to say, like, that one student might be exceptional at one thing, and then, that they should only be looking at this kind of school. Because you'll see schools that run the whole gamut. You'll have students with 2.5 GPAs in class with students who have 4.5 GPAs, simply because of the majors they offer, their location, their price point, their financial aid packaging. So it really is going to depend on, that really depends on the individual student, which is why this process for you as students and for it's got to be the most informed, and educated decision that you're starting now. Does that answer your question? I don't know that it does, but. Yes.
A friend of mine recently told me that his son applied to the university, was accepted to the university, but then wasn't accepted to the business school within the university. So I was wondering how common that is, that you have to apply to a specific school, and then how does that work in terms of if you are not sure what you want your major to be going in, and you're accepted to university, what happens in that case?
Yeah, I would say that's fairly common. So the question is like a student applied to a school, was admitted to the school, but not admitted to the program or admitted to the college, the College of Business, right? They were admitted, maybe to, like an example might be UMass Amherst, right? You might get admitted to UMass Amherst to the university itself, but maybe you're not admitted to the School of Engineering, you're not admitted to Eisenberg School of Business. That's really quite common. And so what the university is sort of then left with a decision, and this varies school by school. Each school that does this might handle this a little bit differently. And it really depends on the school, but most often it's that we're making a decision, we want you as a student, we feel you're qualified, we feel you're college ready, we feel you're ready to be successful on our campus, but that this in particular program or this particular school of whatever is highly selective, and you might have to earn your way in by showing us that you can be successful on our campus first, and then applying to sort of change your major or transfer into the program. And so typically what students will do is, if that's not clear to a student when they arrive as a freshman, and they're not driven enough to try to pursue that, then that becomes clear to us, at the end of their freshman year, or whenever they apply to get into the college itself.
We know that you have a lot of great questions. We want to quickly finish the exercise with our 3 candidates, and then we'll open it up to more general questions. So, does anyone have any last-minute questions or comments about the 3 candidates before we vote on them?
I'm just curious, we've got the middle candidate is very academically solid, but the last candidate is very motivated to go to the school. How do you weigh those differences?
That's your job as the admissions committee. I think that's one of the questions you have to ask. And so that's exactly the job of an admissions committee, is to weigh those kind of things and to make a decision. And the decision, again, would be very different depending on what school you're at or the needs in a particular year. So I'm not going to answer your question right now. I'm going to throw it back at you. We're actually going to, and this is not, again, I don't think any of our schools would say this is the way we do the committee. We don't bring 3 at a time and say, okay, we can only admit 1. Which one? We look at kids much more individual and make decisions in an individual way. So don't think that it's like, well, what if I had just been in a different group when they looked at me? This is not reality. But it is what we're going to do right now. So we're going to do this democratically. We're going to do them in the order that we presented. So Dory was first. How many of you would choose Dory as, if you can only admit one of these students to Red Brick University, who would vote Dory? No one? Alright, we got a couple Dory fans. Exactly. Alright, and the second one we did was Henry. Who would go with Henry? Alright. Henry's definitely more than Dory. And then how about Marcella? Alright. So this group would admit Marcella. Exactly. Which, again, I don't think is a bad choice. I think any of these 3, even at Red Brick, would be a good choice. But sometimes you can't admit everybody because you have too many qualified students. And that's the other thing about a no. It doesn't mean you're not qualified. It means there's not space for you. And so you're still going to take it personally, but it's not always they're saying I'm not good enough. But I think that there's strengths with all 3 of these students. We are now going to introduce ourselves because we don't actually work for Red Brick University. We're going to let you know where we work and what decisions we would have made at our individual schools. So I'm Terry Malone, I work at Clark University, and we would have admitted all 3 of these. I don't think Henry's the best match for us. We do have a small math computer science program, but it's pretty small, and the level of work he's already doing, he'd probably tap out quickly, but we're part of the consortium, and he can go take a couple classes at WPI and get that liberal arts degree if he wanted to. So we didn't admit them all, but I think as a just overall fit, Dory and Marcella would fit better at Clark.
My name is Allison Martin. I'm Assistant Director of Admissions at Assumption College in Worcester. We are a liberal arts college, and in looking at all of these candidates, they are quite different, but yet all have similar aspects as well, and they would be considered admissible to the college. We might look a little bit more deeply into the disciplinary action with Henry on his plagiarism, maybe even invite him in for an interview so that he could actually discuss that with us one-on-one to make sure that he's aware of what he did and that it certainly isn't going to be happening again. But academically, all 3 would be considered admissible to the college.
So hi, my name is John Shiner. I'm one of the assistant deans and one of the directors of admissions at Framingham State University. I would say also we would probably admit all three of these candidates. I would say Henry would likely be eligible for like our honors program and some additional merit aid. But also in terms of like his specific interest in like robotics and things like that, he's there might be some things about our campus that might not be the most best fit for him, similar to Clark. But yeah, all three of these would certainly be admissible at Framingham State. And yeah, we would also probably be curious about the plagiarism piece as well, because that's just, when you get to the college level, it's just, you get kicked out. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. At this time, before we open up for questions, I just have a couple of topics if you can just expand on a little bit. I know some students have questions about. In terms of test scores, standardized tests, can you just talk a little bit about at your institution, super scoring?
Sure. Well, at Framingham State, we are technically a test optional school for all of our programs, with the exception of any of our STEM majors. So the ACTs or SATs would still be required for consideration for one of our STEM programs, and they are also required for consideration for our honors program. So for our high achieving students that want that additional merit aid and selection for our honors program, we would still require them. We do super score, so we will take your highest English score and your highest math score and smash them together. So we do encourage students to, if they're concerned about that and they feel comfortable submitting their scores, taking them perhaps multiple times if they don't feel satisfied with the first time that they've taken them. But we also don't want a student to be taking it like 5 or 6 times, hoping that they're going to get that extra 10 points. Because for us, it won't make a huge difference, and it's just going to cost you a lot of money and headaches. So yeah.
So at Assumption, we are test score optional. You're not required to submit your SAT scores unless you are applying into the direct entry nursing program. Also, where we are a Division II school for athletics, your SAT scores would be required for NCAA regulations, but not for admission to the college. So again, we are test score optional. A lot of times, families will ask, how do I know if I should submit, or if my child should submit, or if the student should submit their SAT scores? If you feel that your SAT scores are a true reflection of who you are as a student, by all means submit them. But if you feel like, listen, I had a really bad day, this is clearly not how I operate as a student, we can see that from your transcript. So don't feel obligated to send your SAT scores. We're not going to judge you on 1 day of testing or 2 days of testing if you took the test again. We're taking everything into consideration. We're looking at your grades over a 3, sometimes 3.5 year period. So we're weighing all of that in. So the decision really is up to the student. It's a personal preference, and we really want you to be comfortable with whether or not you want to submit those scores or not.
Clark is also a test optional school, and test optional for all. We have no majors, programs, or groups of students that we would be required. You don't need to submit test scores to be considered for merit scholarships. So it really is about, do you want to send those scores or not? Are they something that you think reflects who you are or not? And we never assume that because we don't have test scores that they're bad. 40% of our students don't submit test scores, so we make a lot of decisions without them and are not concerned by it. If you do submit them, we will super score, and we also allow self-reported scores. So if you want to send them, you can just send them directly to our office in PDF format. You don't have to go through the testing agencies.
Thank you. If you could give us just quickly any advice about the essay students.
Yeah, I think that what the student said earlier was great advice. Don't wait till the last minute to start it. You look at the prompts ahead of time, know what kind of essays you have to have. Look to see if your schools do require supplemental essays. You don't want to think you're about to hit submit and then discover that there's an extra essay. So be organized about it, I think, is a big one. have somebody else look at it, but someone else said this before, it's still yours. You take advice, listen to advice, but at the end of the day, it's your decision, it's your essay. So don't make it sound like it was written by your mom. We can tell the difference between a 17-year-old boy's voice and their mom's voice in writing. So make sure it's yours authentically. And then the final thing is don't stress too much about it. We're looking, it doesn't have to be Pulitzer Prize writing, it's your writing. It doesn't have to be on this unique topic that nobody's ever written about. Last year we did the math and combined we've read like 20,000 essays. There's not that magic topic that nobody's ever written about. What makes it yours is you. Put your voice into it, and it doesn't matter if it was an essay about going to summer camp that we've read before. We've never read your essay about going to summer camp.
I have to agree with Terry. I don't think there's a topic yet that we haven't read. I've had essays that have made me laugh, that have made me cry, that have made me cringe, and have made me say, oh my, I don't think I was supposed to know that. Keep your audience in mind when you are writing this essay. If your family is in witness protection, I probably shouldn't know that. Yes, that was an actual essay. But, you know, don't use it as a therapy session either. You know, throw around some topics. Don't be afraid to utilize your resources. Ask your family, ask your English teacher, ask your guidance counselor. You can even sometimes reach out to the admissions counselors and ask us what we think about your essay topic. I think the best way to summarize the importance of your essay is your application itself is very black and white. We're getting your information, we're getting your transcript. Your essay is the one chance you have to really jump off the page and add color to your application and let us know something about yourself that the application isn't going to express to us. So again, make it special to you, make it specific to you, and make sure you're getting a message across to us that you want us to know about you. But again, be careful with the topics that you choose, and please have them proofread. We definitely check for punctuation, we check for capitalization. I do not want to see 650 words in one paragraph. Again, we're reading thousands and thousands and thousands of essays. Our eyes do get tired, so keep us interested.
I don't think I have anything to add. That's pretty comprehensive. I think the most important thing is I think really that it is authentically, genuinely yours. And so as much as you want to have other folks read it, but you also don't want to have them like write it, you know, like, and so we can also tell when an essay has been overthought. So when it's been over-edited and it's just been, if you've been working on it for 8 months, like, you should have stopped 5 months ago. And because it really, then it starts to lose your voice. You start to be looking for synonyms of words that you've never used before. And like we can tell when that happens. All of a sudden there's this 6-syllable word, and we're like, I don't know what that means. Like, how many times did she left click on this word, like to find like a better word? And we can tell too by like your grades and your SAT scores if you're using vocabulary that's perhaps outside of what we would expect based on your grades and SAT scores or ACT scores. And I think the young man earlier also alluded to this too, like start this a little bit earlier, like do a draft, you will do a draft, right? And put it away for a while and then come back to it. The other thing too is make sure, as was mentioned, we read hundreds and thousands of these, and so with the Common App, fortunately and thankfully, has a 650-word limit. I had a student last year who also sent me her 3,000-word version, which went, admittedly, and I don't really have any reservations saying this, went right into wastebasket. Because it's one, she didn't follow the directions, right? We said 650 words, that's the limit, that's what's on the Common App. And I don't have time to read a 3,000-word essay when I already have the better, shorter version. So that's the other thing too, is if there are directions, if there are specific requirements on the application, follow those, because those are there for a reason, not just to save our eyeballs, but also Because we want to make sure that you're going to do that when you're at our schools, and that you're going to follow the rules on our campus and the guidelines that your professors set. So it's also an indication to us of your ability and willingness to sort of follow some of that direction. So.
Piggyback on that a little bit in terms of following the rules. So we are often asked questions about letters of recommendation. How many? I know that each school has their own limits of what that would be, but sometimes students will ask, what if I add on this person, that person, how many, and what's that?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, you want to follow those directions. So if a school says we require 3 letters of recommendation, it's like the Monty Python rule for anyone that's a Monty Python fan. Like, we don't want 2, we don't want 5, we want 3. And so, like, that's, right? Thou shalt not submit 9 letters of recommendation. Because because we might not be, you want to find, again, similar to the essay, you want to find the number of genuine, authentic people in your life that can give us a real idea of who you are, your background, and they're going to round out your application. And so by the 8th letter of recommendation, we're hearing from, the pastor you had for CCD when you were in 6th grade, and it's been 9 years since you talked to that person, right? So we authentically, we really just want to hear from those that know you best and that you are trusting with this responsibility. And also, I don't want to be, I don't want to have to get a pair of glasses anytime soon. So, save my eyeball.
Ditto.
I have a question about the letters of recommendation. So some letter writers are better than others, I've read some applications as well. How do you take that into account and not necessarily judge a whole student accountable for the quality of the letter writer? Just be going out and kind of scope out the letter writers and making sure that they're right.
Yeah. So the question was about, do we take the quality of the writing in the recommendation into account? And it's something that we talk about with our counselors in our training process, is which the application is the student's application, and we are trying to know if the student is admissible. I hate reading not well-written recommendations, but the question I'll ask is, what did I learn about the student? And if I learned positive, wonderful things about that student and how they engage in the classroom and their community, I'm not going to hold the fact that it wasn't the most well-written application against the student. There are a lot of things that we talk about in terms of having to put your biases aside. We do judge the quality of the writing of the essay, because that is the student's writing. But even that, we have on our staff, he's a former English, he was an English major, he was an English teacher, he is one of the most beautiful writers I have ever read. And sometimes we used to say, you can't expect that quality of writing out of a 17-year-old kid. And so that's one of his biases, is he is very hard on the writing of essays, and we check him on it. I personally, because of some personal history, really gravitate towards students who have overcome health challenges. But I can't say, oh, just forgive all those D's, it doesn't matter. We all have biases, and so we just check them. And so that's the stuff we talk about, is what are we judging in the application? It's not the quality of the writing of the recommendation. So what are we judging? And when we have biases that are impacting that, check it. We also read every single application twice to try to make sure that those kind of things don't interfere. So I know I went off beyond your question, but hopefully I answered the question.
And my last question is actually two-part. I know, I think you mentioned before about interest. What does that mean when you track interest, or if you do? And then the other part is with that interest in terms of how students communicate with the school, what's appropriate, and do you also look at social media?
There's a lot there. So different schools will tell you different things about demonstrated interest because they use them in different ways. Clark, it is something we track in terms of the context that we have with students. So if you come and visit our school, we'll know that. If you visit our school 5 times, we'll know that. If you meet us at a college fair, if one of our reps comes to visit Shrewsbury High in the fall and you come meet with them, we'll know that. If you email us questions, we'll know that. We are not going to admit an academically not qualified student just because they're super high interest. We're not going to deny a perfectly qualified student just because they haven't done those things, but it's one of the many pieces of the puzzle. I actually like that the presentation actually uses puzzle pieces, because that's what this is. It's trying to put the puzzle pieces together for an individual student as well as for our applicant pool as a whole, so that at the end we have a nice picture of a brand new incoming class. And because, it was said earlier when we were presenting the candidates, we want students that want us. We just know historically that students that come to Clark excited by Clark are going to stay at Clark, they're going to graduate from Clark, they're going to be happy alumni at Clark. And so it is a piece of the puzzle, but it's never the determining factor. But I would say we're also looking for genuine. We talked a lot already tonight about genuine and authentic. Emailing me every day with a random question is not interest. Emailing me with a question that you can if you email me and say, what's your deadline? You can find that in every brochure we've sent you, at the bottom of every email we've sent you. It's on our website in a million places. That's not showing interest, that's showing laziness. If you send me an email because you heard about some research that's happening in the sociology department that you're really excited by, and you want to be connected with a student that's working on that project, you're showing genuine interest there, and you're going to make me do a little bit of work, but I'm going to do it for you because you've shown genuine interest. So at Clark, we love you to show interest if you're genuinely interested. We do not look at social media. I do not have time for that.
Assumption is, yes, a school that does track interest as well, but again, it is not a determining factor if you are accepted. I think that your interest in a school should be based on your interest in a school. If you want to come to open house, you go to open house. If you want to attend the high school visit to get more information, you do that. If you want to come back for one of the accepted students' days, do that. Because you're only going to help yourself out by seeing something that maybe you didn't see the last time you were there, or hear something that you didn't hear the last time. We always encourage as much engagement as possible. Again, just reaching out with a question that you can find anywhere on our website is not demonstrated interest, but we want to make sure that we're connecting you with the people in the areas that you're interested in. So by doing so, it lets us know what you're interested in, and we're making sure that we're even offering the right programs that students are looking for. That's something that we're always wanting to stay on top of. What are we hearing when we're out there? What are students asking for? So by you getting in touch with your admissions counselor to find out if that school offers that, it also helps the college make sure that we're on top of providing that area of interest to the student. Social media. Please be careful with what you put on social media. Make your pages private. If you had a disciplinary action that you need to self-report on your application as well, don't downplay it. We will find out what's going on. We did have an incident with a student who, in an angry moment, sent out a tweet that got retweeted all the way up to Fox News. And it ended up being quite the scandal, and all I had to do was type it in, and there it was. Don't be that student. Be careful of what you do. Remember, once you put something out there, it's out there. And you don't want that to hinder your acceptance to a college.
Add to that. Like I said, I don't have time to check. But if somebody notifies me of something, I'm going to look at it. And the other thing, and this actually happens after the admit decision, but a lot of schools, Clark included, creates a class of 20 whatever Facebook group. And we, a couple of years ago, had a student that was posting some very toxic things in that environment. And we ended up rescinding the decision because we did at that point start to dig a little bit more into some character and some stuff he was posting on his own personal social media, and said, this behavior is not something that fits well within our community, because it was really derogatory, toxic stuff. So even after you get the admit letter, just be good people. Just be good people. That's it. That's all we're asking. We're not asking you to be perfect, but we are asking you to be good people.
Yeah, I would reiterate all these things, and we also, I mean, as we mentioned, like we read hundreds and thousands of applications, and so we don't really have time to look at every student's social media account. I will say the exception is this, for, at least at Framingham State, is if a student is sort of on the threshold of admissibility, right? They are just below or just above, like, they're debating whether or not to admit a student who's at the bottom end of our thresholds. We might sort of start dating a little bit, and then that's where like the interest comes in. So we had very recently had a student who was right on the threshold, and in the student's application had talked about their interest in being involved in something on our campus, and then when I go into that, see that this student has never opened an email from us, has not visited campus, did not come to the college, visit to his high school, and I'm like, what do you, like, there's no way, you're not, we're in February and you've never interacted with our school at all, and that's pretty glaring to us that we are maybe not the first choice, and that maybe the student isn't really interested in coming to our school. And so the same thing happened actually at one of our accepted students receptions a couple years ago. We had a student post something really inappropriate on the accepted student page on Facebook, and then showed up to the accepted students reception wearing something super inappropriate. And it was on that day that we told him that he was not going to be welcome on our campus. And it was really quite glaring once we dug into that he had some behaviors that were going to be really, really concerning, or at least demonstrated behavior that we were not going to welcome on our campus, and we did not feel he was going to be successful or positively contribute to our community. So word of warning to those of you that might get senioritis as well. Right, once you get that acceptance letter, that's not the end. Like we will ask for your final high school transcript. We may follow up with other, if you get suspended during your second semester senior year, we're going to ask to be notified about that. So that's not the end once you get that letter in the mail. So my best advice to you right now, starting right now, don't take your phones out to do this right now, but is lock all of your social media stuff down. Like, everything has got to be super private. Delete the picture of you in the woods with a solo cup. Like get rid of the picture. Like, get rid of the misogynistic, posts about whatever, or sharing some inappropriate song. Like, just lock it all down so we can't see it, and then we'll just figure it out when you get to our campus. Okay.
Thank you very much. So at this time, if there are any questions.
So we've gone back to these words a couple of times, authentic and genuine. Oh, sorry, let's repeat the question, sorry. So basically the question was, how do we weigh involvement in extracurriculars, employment, sports, clubs, community service, things like that, against the GPA and SAT scores that accurately portray for and so we, as Terry mentioned, it is sort of a puzzle. We look at all the different pieces and we factor in all of those as well. But as we said earlier, one of the most important things we want is a student's application to be authentic and genuine. We can tell when a student gets to junior year and all of a sudden they join every club at their school and they start volunteering an hour a week at the animal shelter, and they're sort of padding their resume in preparation for college, and that's not really authentic. As I mentioned with Dory, she's been involved in sort of this blog and journalism and has had an interest in it for multiple years. And so when she's interested in studying journalism at Red Brick University, like, we see that's a legitimate, demonstrated interest in that field. And so, so we want to see students, that are really invested in something over time. And that might be that they may have discovered that later on. And so they should discuss that or get in their essay or have a letter of recommendation from that person. But ultimately, like, we really just want to see a student that is legitimately interested in something, that is successful in the classroom, and that is going to contribute to our community at the school. While certainly recognizing that there are students who decide to involve themselves in other activities that might not be recognized in certain ways. We have an e-sports team, and so it's difficult for a student to sort of talk about their level of investment maybe in video games or whatever the other activity is. And so we recently had a student who just shared shared the number of Twitch followers he had on his video games. So for parents out there, like, yeah, so Twitch, so for those who don't know what Twitch is, you can like live stream your share in a variety of ways, your video game playing or your vlog or whatever. And so like radio stations use this, they show their DJs on TV. Anyway, so what we want to see is like a student that's invested in something, that's serious about their studies, that's serious about an activity, that has a legitimate interest in something. And that adds to the diversity of our campus too, is that we have students that join us with a variety of skill sets. So we need the quarterback just as much as we need the student who writes poetry and runs the open mic night. Like, all of that contributes to the community of our campus and the different learning styles and interest levels, that we have. Does that make sense?
And I just want to add that it could also have to do with the individual university. I think that the way a student likes to get involved is probably going to be reflective in the type of university that they're also looking for. So someone who may be very involved in community service is looking to continue that in college, and they may be looking for a college that does give back to the community. Assumption is a Catholic institution, and we are called to giving back. So we do have a lot of students who are very much involved in the community. I think our students last year logged over 160,000 hours. 160,000 hours in community service. 0 of those hours are required. So that just tells you the type of student that might be drawn to Assumption and the type of student that is at Assumption. But it depends on if your student is applying to Assumption and has, a stellar record, is got strong academics, we're not going to deny the student because they weren't involved in community service. They're clearly investing their time into their education and their future goals. That's what we want to see. We want to see, and like John said, a very authentic application. So whether they're doing community service or not, if they have a job or not, we're looking at the complete package. If a student, maybe their grades aren't as fantastic, but we see that they have been contributing, 16 hours a week here and working a job to help support at home. We're taking everything into consideration. So again, I think it's reflective on the institution as well as how much the student likes to give back and what their involvement is. I think that they're going to choose an institution based on what they like to do. Did that help? Okay.
I was wondering if you could talk to how you look at undeclared major applicants versus those that have declared.
Okay, so at Assumption, we actually, unless you're going into the direct entry nursing program, our students do not have to declare a major until the end of their sophomore year. So being a liberal arts college, we want our students to utilize those first 2 years to sample out as many different areas of interest as possible, to meet with their advisors and their professors multiple times over their freshman and sophomore year to really hone in on what their true calling is, because we don't just want them to be professionally successful at the end of the day, but personally successful, coming home and being happy with what they're doing. So we want to make sure that come the end of sophomore year, our students are declaring that major with confidence. For some students, that comes very easily. Some students have known since they were 2 years old that they wanted to be a police officer, a doctor, a lawyer, an archaeologist. For other students, it's a much more daunting task, but we offer the resources for those students to work more one-on-one with advisors and professors through many opportunities to make sure they're declaring that major with confidence. Does that answer your question for that one?
At Clark, our students also have until the end of sophomore year to declare a major, and the vast majority actually end up doing some kind of dual interest, either a double major or a major minor. We actually don't allow students to declare a major in their first semester. So every single one of our students, when they enroll in our student system, says undecided. And then, between January of their first year and that year and a half later at the end of their second semester, they're slowly declaring majors. Most of them do it in their sophomore year.
And I just want to add too that students tend to change their major 5, 6, 7 times. That's okay. Remember that. If you think that you're getting into a major that you absolutely love, and you start taking the classes and say, this really isn't what I thought it was going to be, it's okay. You can switch your majors. Attending something like a liberal arts college is going to offer you those transferable skills that will transfer into any career choice or any major that you're looking to go into. So if you're someone who's really uncertain about what you want to study, a liberal arts college is probably what you're looking for, so that you really can kind of dabble in different areas to find out where your true interests are.
Yeah, again, similar to Assumption, Framingham State, there's a couple of programs that there are specific admissions requirements for those programs. But on a whole, I think the national average is students change their major on average like 3.2 times over the course of their 4 or 5 years in college. So it's really cool. I changed mine 3 times. And partially because I had taken a course that sort of pivoted me towards a different area. And I took a course in my initial major that I absolutely hated, and then was like, oh, well, I don't want to do that anymore. And because when you get to college, sometimes these things change too. Like we have, often we'll have students that enter like our food and nutrition science program, which is a little more selective, it's really unique, and the number of students that go into that, and then they get there and they realize that they're not just helping people eat more kale, they're actually like doing science, and and a lot of them end up switching to biology or to something else, or to our health and wellness major, because they realize that that specific major is not exactly what they thought it was when they applied. So we have a significant portion of our students that apply undeclared. Oftentimes on the Common App, at least for our Common App, you can list a secondary major. And so we take that in consideration too, that a student has maybe a general interest in another area that could potentially be their major. So when we refer them to advising, we might say this student has a particular talent or an interest in the sciences, but they've applied undeclared. So maybe line them up with a science course first semester and stuff like that.
So is this something that you find out from that particular college or university, your board, or how do you find out which colleges require you to select majors? And then how do they make that decision? I mean, a student may have interest in 2 or 3 majors even in high school, right? So how does that choice play a role? Do they be denied just because they selected one of the top is selected and they get into, and then they simply denied, even though they could have gotten into one of the other approach?
Yeah, and that's where the question earlier might come into play. So the question is, if a student is interested in a lot of different majors, and then how, like a school, how each individual school sort of treats it. So this is the best part about starting early, is that you're going to discover all of these things as you research each school. And so each school is going to treat the applications differently. Their admissions process might be a little bit different. And so for the example I gave earlier with UMass, there are very specific, like you are applying to the School of Engineering. And so it's very, very specific, and they might have different admissions criteria than the arts and humanities. And so that's where the research and really educating yourself on the schools that you're going to apply to becomes really, really important. And again, it's each school sort of treats this differently in terms of admitting students to their college of STEM as opposed to admitting them to the overall university, right? Each school is going to be sort of unique in that. Oftentimes that information is going to be on their website, on the admissions page of the website. We have spent a lot of time and a lot of money and energy developing websites to best inform you about our school. And so we encourage you to really dive into those as you're sort of whittling the list down of where you're going to apply.
We have time for one more question.
Okay. That goes, yeah, that's really specific by school. Framingham, we don't typically require them, but students can request them. But I might leave that to you guys.
So the interviews are not required at Assumption, but we always encourage them. We invite students to come onto campus so that we get to know the student, in a very holistic way, get to see the student, they're not just a name on a paper, which is really nice. A lot of times it allows the student a chance to maybe explain something a little bit further. Maybe they wanted to go over that 650-word essay that John threw out and, wanted to, talk more about it. That's the time to do that. The only time when we might reach out to the student and suggest an interview is if you perhaps apply to the college early action and maybe you're on the cusp of acceptance. We really are going to probably put you out towards regular decision, wait for your mid-year grades to come in, and suggest you come in and chat with us on, why Assumption or why the college that you're interviewing in. Tell us what you're looking to do. How are you going to be an asset to this community? That interview really can help, the decisions sway in your favor or not so much. But I would definitely, it's on the college's websites if they offer. There are many colleges and universities that don't offer interviews, period, just because of the sheer volume of students applying. We just can't always accommodate. But Assumption does always offer interviews for students who are interested in coming in. They're always welcome, but not required.
Clark has a similar philosophy in that they're not required but encouraged. It's student initiated. And schools will offer different ways to interview. So Assumption talked about students coming to campus to interview, and Clark has on-campus interviews. Schools that offer interviews will also have that be part of our recruitment travel. So admissions counselors spend a lot of their time in the fall actually traveling, visiting high schools, doing college fairs. When I'm on the road, last fall in a 2-week time period, I did 40 interviews in the DC area. I spent a lot of time in Panera Breads. And so that might be an opportunity if you're looking at some schools farther away. We also utilize technology. We do Skype interviews for kids that either we're not going to be in their area or they can't come to campus. Other schools might use alumni. So if you want to interview, and it's something that the school offers, reach out to them because I bet they would want to work with you to make it happen.
Thank you. So with the interest of time, I want to thank our colleges for